2017 was an amazing year for video games, or at least for me. I'm kind of a niche gamer, and so I don't really play a lot of the mainstream stuff. I know that the year got crazy with like loot boxes and stuff like that, and I actually did some videos on those, and that was a little bit unfortunate. It kind of killed off a good year for video games, but at the same time, I don't want to overlook the rest of the year because there were some amazing games that I got to finally play. Now, the twist to my list is I like to put on games that I played for the first time this year. So some of these games may not be particularly new to 2017, but at the same time, this is my list, so I don't really care. Michael here, and today we're going to be talking about my top 5 games of 2017 list style, which I don't do very often. I do it like once a year. Over the last decade or so almost, it's actually been quite a while that they've been doing this, but anyways, it's been a weird trend to kind of go in and do the whole retro platformer thing, or retro style games, and there's even first person shooters that are going retro, and none of them have really ended up hitting it off well. There's been a few games that have been good examples to where they take the old concepts, but it's always been about updating to the new, and one of the games that released this year particularly played to my nostalgia. Rolling in at number 5 is Sonic Mania. Sonic Mania was one of those games that ended up getting announced at a very weird time. People have been saying Sonic has been dead for a long time, which they haven't. I'm actually a fan of the 3D Sonic games. I know that they're not particularly amazing most of the time, but Sonic Generations was incredible, and I actually like Sonic Forces quite a bit. It's definitely not in my top 10 or top 50 games of 2017, but it's still a game that actually was enjoyable, and I still play it today. It's just a game that I kind of play off. But one game that I'm always going to end up looking back to and actually looking at as a classic is Sonic Mania. The weird thing about the old Sonic games is they still hold up today. Sonic Mania takes those design elements and ends up making it into a brand new game, and while that comes into some hiccups, especially when they try to do the whole nostalgia sort of things, it does end up being an absolutely perfect Metro platformer. It is a game that is a momentum platformer, which is a genre that is already sort of dying out. There ain't much competition inside that space, but it ends up taking it into a whole new level. It doesn't only look great and sound great, it plays great and has absolutely great level design to where no matter where you're going, you're always moving forward, which is something that is so unique to Sonic, and it also carries through to where every single level, every single stage, every single act, every single area of each individual level, oh my god, I can't even talk correctly, has something new to offer. And so the entire experience is actually quite longer than I expected as well. It's about 2 to 3 hours when I ended up playing through it originally, and it's got a bunch of Chaos Emeralds and things like that you can get into, and it's just got a ton of content for a game that I really didn't expect to be as good as it was. It was an excellent callback to a game that I really enjoyed back as a kid, and it's incredible. So if you haven't picked it up and you like platformers, go check it out. Now, there's going to be a few people that ended up hearing me say that I like 3D Sonic games and be like, oh man, he likes really terrible games, and this next entry in the list probably isn't going to improve that impression whatsoever. But at the same time, this is a list about games that I enjoyed, and one of the things I enjoy about games is how fun and ridiculous they can be, and this next one definitely has that. It may not be revolutionary in graphics or gameplay, but it's definitely ridiculously fun. Bouncing in at number 4 is Senran Kagura Estival Versus. While Senran Kagura Estival Versus may not end up having the most in-depth combo system, it is essentially what people have described as Dynasty Warriors with anime tits. And that's kind of a basic description of it that most people only need. They're like, hey, Dynasty Warriors, I like that. It's kind of mindless action. But the thing about Estival Versus is it has so much uniqueness thrown into it as well. It doesn't only have you going up against thousands of little enemies called Shinobi Grunts and taking them out in the loads with special abilities and giant weapons and things, but at the same time, it's also going to have a character versus character system to where it's actually going to be equal leveled characters kind of battling it out. And obviously, there's some fan servicey stuff thrown in there, but the actual gameplay itself is actually really in depth. The combo system may only be X and Y sort of basic strong attacks, weak attacks, and combinations, but you're able to transform each different character, and it gives them an entirely new moveset and sometimes different weapons entirely. And there's a huge roster of characters, meaning that you're going to be playing all these different types of characters, and they all feel completely unique. For example, one character might be using a greatsword that swings really heavy and really slow, but it actually has a lot of damage and a lot of power behind it, and it actually has some meaningful weight, while somebody that's using dual-wielding daggers also will end up having some nice, decent weight to it, but they're going to be much quicker and not do as much damage, and they're going to be focusing more on movement rather than just taking it over on overall power. And it's the first Musou fighter that I've ever played, and still the only one that actually has some meaningful combat, and it actually feels like you're using those sorts of weapons, which is actually fairly unique in the genre itself. And it's also one of those games that has a ton of fan service, so if you're totally into that, that's fine. You can go ahead and customize your character, put on a pirate outfit, go to the beach, and tear apart their clothes as if you have a better sense of fashion. And of course, there's lots of pantsu, which, I mean, there's even a lottery for pantsu in the game, so if you want that, there you go. It's definitely a game I recommend to people that like Muso fighters. And Pantsu. Don't forget Pantsu. I mentioned character versus character, but what if I wanted something more personal, more 1v1, more solid skill and combat proficiencies? Well, there's a genre for that, and it's called the fighting game. And when I was a kid, I really was into the genre, but I kind of fell out of it. So I wanted to get back into the genre this year, and I ended up finding the most absolute best fighting game ever available. Building in at number 3 is Guilty Gear Xrd Revelator Rev 2, which is technically, Rev 2 is technically an update, which came out in 2017, so that's how I'm justifying it for a 2017 list. You can check it out. I'm not lying, it came out in 2017. Ignore the release list. Guilty Gear Xrd is not only a game that absolutely looks gorgeous and beautiful in the way it's designed and built and has a ton of style, but it's also one that is solid in its mechanics. And I did mention that I was getting back into fighting games, and Guilty Gear Xrd was probably the best option. It has a huge in-depth tutorial that teaches you how to basically do any combo in the game, and teaches you a bunch of fighting game mechanics, not only ones that are specific to Guilty Gear, yes, most of them are, but it also teaches you the basics of a fighting game in general, and it has some really cool challenges that actually get you to do things rather than just looking at a wiki page that says, hey, this is how you do stuff, and uses a bunch of terminology that you don't understand. Instead, it shows you those terminologies and makes you use them. But on top of this, not only making it a good entry for people that want to get back into fighting games, it also looks freaking gorgeous and is balanced incredibly well. They took 3D models and made it into a sprite style to where the frame rates and the animations are low, and it just makes it look gorgeous. It looks like an anime put into a game, and it's absolutely incredible, even though I don't really like anime. But regardless, it looks gorgeous, and it plays fantastically as well. It is incredibly balanced where you can do any character and do perfectly fine. There is some exception for lower skill players like Kadama, I can't even remember his name because I don't really like him. He's a big bulky dude and you can just shoot him at range and you can't really do much. But aside from that, it ends up being incredibly fun and incredibly rewarding when you end up taking any character. Each character feels incredibly unique as well with their own different mechanics and different specials, and it is just so incredibly satisfying whenever you end up finishing a mode. And there's also an incredible single-player mode called MOM, which is Medals of Millionaires. And basically when you end up going through it, it turns the game almost into an RPG-style game to where you're going to be going through different fights, and you're going to be leveling up and collecting different gear and things along those lines, and it's going to be ramping up the difficulty. Now, this is also a game to where if you want to play online, you need to have the latest edition, which I think is still Rev 2. However, you're going to get your butt kicked. But I even found that for an amateur like me, the AI is all I needed. And if I ever have a friend over that wants to play a fighting game, I can kick his butt. And that's really all we want from fighting games, isn't it? Quite frankly, yeah. If you're looking for a fighting game, Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2 or Revelator Rev 2 is the game to have. And if you don't have it already, you're not a real fan. I sort of made an exception for the last one. I used an expansion to kind of say, hey, it came out in 2017, and this next one, I'm not even going to make an excuse. It released on Steam in 2017, so there you go. But I really ended up getting into it this year, and it's a game that I really, really should have ended up playing way before now. And it's a game that I actually played the closed beta for, so I even knew I liked it, but at the same time, I didn't pick it up for some reason. And, of course, it ends up being an MMO, which MMOs I've kind of fallen out of favor of, but just like the fighting games, I kind of wanted to get back into it, and I found one that is absolutely fantastic. It may be niche, but it's absolutely great. Heating up slot number 2 is Black Desert. Online. That's a part of it. The online part is a bit, yeah, that's part of the title. I don't know why. Trademarks. Black Desert is a huge game. It is absolutely massive in the way that they end up building a really interesting world. It does kind of follow in a lot of tropes that MMOs have, but it is technically a sandbox MMO. Right after the tutorial, which takes about 2 minutes, you're able to just kind of go around and do whatever you want. If you want to go ahead and be a level 1 character and go and try and fight a giant dragon, freaking go for it. But at the same time, it ends up throwing in some theme park elements that are in theme park MMOs and ends up making it a little bit more interesting. On top of that, it has a really, really cool world. They weren't afraid of entering in giant areas of just absolute nothingness, and it adds a weird authenticity. There's a lot of authentic feeling inside this game, and there is some gamey sort of stuff. You can end up having some fast travel elements, and there's some weird sort of gamey stuff they end up doing with management and stuff, but you're able to do whatever you want in this game. That's what's appealing. It has incredible combat to where you're going to be going through. It's almost like a Muso fighter to where you're taking on hundreds of enemies at a time, or maybe you're going 1v1 against a strong boss or something along those lines. And there's a nice selection of classes that have all different sort of combat abilities, and they feel fairly different as well. If I ever get bored of one character, I just go ahead and switch to another one. But what's really appealing is it's just a game where you can do whatever you want. If you want to go ahead and go in and be a massive PvP killer and just go out and take people out, you can do that. If you want to lead a giant guild and do that, you can do that. If you want to go ahead and raid giant bosses, you can do that. Or if you just want to sit at town and fish all day, you can do that. You can build a trading empire. You can go ahead and capture horses and train them and just take them out on giant roads. And one thing that I really enjoy about this game is just how relaxing it feels and how authentic the world is built. And when I actually ended up logging back in, the game was snowing and they were building up on my horse and I thought it was cute. And so I was just rolling alongside and I just enjoyed a good 20 minutes of me just riding a horse around. Didn't accomplish anything, but I still enjoyed it. And that's something about Black Desert. It's a game to where your success is based on whatever the hell you want to do, and it's super enjoyable. It may be niche, but it's an MMO I think is worth trying, especially if you're looking for a sandbox MMO that is actually fun. I just wish I had the time to get back into it, because it is a game that's going to take up all your time. Like I said, I've spent 20 minutes riding a horse. This year, I really did end up looking back at a lot of genres that I didn't particularly stay in favor of, such as fighting games or MMOs, and I ended up finding some really good games that I really enjoyed and ended up being some of the best games I'd ever played. That said, though, there's always one genre that I always come back to every single year, and that is the JRPG. Japanese RPGs have a centric focus on story. They have stories and character-centric designs that I really enjoy, and it really contrasts to a lot of other Western RPGs, as they say. And it ends up being incredibly interesting because I really like a good story, and a lot of them have ended up introducing a lot of good mechanics as well. And this next entry is forcing its way into this slot because it's just absolutely fantastic, and it's a great apology for a game in the franchise that wasn't particularly great before it. Eating its way into slot number 1 is Tales of Berseria. This is in slot number 1 for the simple fact that this is an apology for Tales of Zestiria. It is a prequel to Tales of Zestiria, which I did not particularly enjoy. I felt like Tales of Zestiria was a very standard story, and it really didn't keep its gameplay mechanics balanced particularly well. It went on for a very long time with very little mechanics, and then all of a sudden it just threw all this stuff at you, and it just didn't make any sense, and it didn't really cherish the way that it could have been. It could have been such an amazing game. Tales of Berseria does everything exactly the opposite. It has an incredible story that actually takes you into a unique adventure to where you're actually starting off with one of the best intros I've ever seen in a JRPG. It gives you a reason to fight, shows you what's going on, and it gives you motivation to push on forward. And to begin with, you're not even playing the hero. You play as an anti-hero, which is incredibly interesting for a JRPG on its own. And on top of this, it ends up taking its gameplay mechanics and exploration to an all-new level for the Tales of franchise. It ends up making it so the new combo system they introduced in Zestiria has been incredibly well enhanced and incredibly well balanced, where you're always getting new combos and new mechanics and different character statuses to end up playing around with. And there's even mechanics that I'm still introducing myself to today, even after I've completed the game. There's a ton of post-game content, but even before then, I was perfectly fine with the 60-hour experience, going through the main story and just playing through everything that was available through that. It has incredible characters, and you're able to learn a lot from Tales of Zestiria. That said, it is sort of held back because it is a prequel to Tales of Zestiria, so if you want absolutely everything, then you'll have to play through Tales of Zestiria, which is not particularly amazing. But at the same time, it's completely worth it to get the full experience of Tales of Berseria. You can technically play Berseria without playing Zestiria. Man, that's getting hard to say. But at the same time, absolutely incredible JRPG and one of the best JRPGs I have ever played. And if you're a Tales of franchise fan, you're actually going to end up finding a ton of references. A lot of that just completely went over my head as well when I ended up looking it up. There's just so much in this game, and there's a lot of content as well, post-game as well. The ending was incredible, and it kind of left a sour feeling in me, not because it was bad, but because the game was just so powerful and so emotional, and it is an incredible JRPG. I think everyone that is a fan of that genre should play. It is in my top 5 JRPGs of all time. It takes JRPG tropes and eats it alive. And there you have it. There's my top 5 for 2017. This was a year that was actually fantastic for me for games because I got to play a lot of older games as well. I ended up picking up a lot of other games, and I kind of wanted to use that as a backdrop for my outro. But first, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this one. Yada, yada. You get it. There's the outro. Let's go ahead and talk about some other recommendations as well, because that's what these videos are about. They're about recommending good games to end up checking out. So there's some other games on this list that I kind of ended up having to cut off because it was 5. So here's 5 extras just as an added bonus. Won't talk about them much, but Rune Factory 4, it is a great Harvest Moon style game. It actually started off as a fantasy Harvest Moon, which is kind of hilarious, but it's essentially a life sim, but it has an in-depth combat system, and it has a lot of interesting sort of elements from JRPGs, so it has like a main story and everything. Fantastic game. It's on the 3DS though, which is a little bit unfortunate. I ended up buying it off the eShop, which made it really easy to port over to Citra for emulation, so I kind of played it on PC most of the time, but it's actually fun on the 3DS as well. It's just my thumbstick is probably going to break from playing that game. Then you also have Ori and the Blind Forest. That technically came out last year, but I played the definitive edition this year, and it's absolutely fantastic platformer. It almost made it in slot number 5, but I decided to keep it in to 2017 on my list, and so that's why it's not on there, but it's absolutely fantastic. Go ahead and check out my review of it. A Hat in Time came out. I just love it because it's cute as hell. It's cute as heck, as they say on the store page. It is technically a retro-style platformer. It's like the N64 platformers, and it's less of a collectathon and more of like a stage platformer similar to Mario and stuff, and I actually enjoyed that quite a bit. I do feel like it's super short though, which is why it's not on the list, and it does have some polish issues here and there. And then Hollow Knight was another Metrovania game that I ended up playing that I really enjoyed. That one was really, really good, and I still haven't finished it yet, and I want to play more of it, but it's just a cool sort of 2D Metrovania game that has a ton of content and a ton of secrets, so I ended up checking out that one out. And then N++, I believe that came out this year. I'm not 100% sure, but I ended up playing it this year, and that is just an excellent Twitch platformer. So if you haven't played a Twitch platformer in a long time, check out N++. Has a ton of user-created levels now. It has a Discord that's completely active and just has a ton of content in it, and they like released another expansion recently that added in another, like an entire length of the game, which is added on to the end of it, and so that now there's an extra plus levels set and everything. It's fantastic game. So yeah, overall, 2017 was a great year for video games, for me specifically, for games that I ended up playing, because this list, when I was actually cutting it down, was like over 20 games long. So yeah, there was a lot of games I ended up trying this year, and I really, really enjoyed a lot of them. And so just keep an eye on other lists and things like that, and then checking out reviews and lists and things like that, because 2017 is going to be marked as a good year for video games in the long run. I know that loot boxes and stuff like that kind of showed up and kind of ruined the end of it, but at the same time, screw those games, because the majority were great. Anyway, see you guys in the next video.